Wireless LAN Professionals podcast, episode 167.
Yeah, a lot of changes, and that's one of the things that's very, very important, I think, for people to understand is that whatever spot you're in today with your life, it's not going to stay there as far as networking is concerned. I mean, I was at Cabletron when we had to deal with Ethernet, tokering, FDDI, frame relay, ATM, ISDN, X.500, and we had all these different protocols. Now it's pretty much Ethernet and Wi-Fi, so it's a little bit easier, but it's going to change.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Well, Perry, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm really, really good, Matthew, and thank you very much for inviting me in.
Pleasure for sure. So for those who don't know you, introduce yourself and what you are doing these days.
Okay, my name is Perry Correll. I'm Director of Product Management at Aerohive. I've been in networking since longer than I almost care to say. Goes back to the Cabletron days, and I remember teaching SEs how to core thicknet cable. So
Wow.
it's a long history in networking, and my history in RF goes back even further. I spent 10 years in the Air Force working airborne radar systems, so that's kind of where I picked up the RF side of my house, and networking was Cabletron to today. So a lot of different jobs.
So you've seen changes through the industry.
Yeah, a lot of changes, and that's one of the things that's very, very important, I think, for people to understand is that whatever spot you're in today with your life, it's not going to stay there as far as networking is concerned. I mean, I was at Cabletron when we had to deal with Ethernet, tokering, FDDI, frame relay, ATM, ISDN, X.500, and we had all these different protocols. Now it's pretty much Ethernet and Wi-Fi, so it's a little bit easier, but it's going to change.
That's the constant, right? Change.
Absolutely. And, one of my roles at Aerohive is I'm actually the interface to the IEEE and the Wi-Fi Alliance.
Okay.
So, we all talk about the latest technologies coming out, but these guys, especially IEEE, they're talking about stuff that's, just getting to the drawing board, which means we're going to be seeing products 3, 4, 5 years from now. And this stuff it's brainiac stuff that's never going to, I shouldn't actually say that, but it's probably never actually going to become a product, but there's going to be a lot of technology that leads out of that. I mean, a lot of the neat stuff that comes out, I'll give you an example. Right now, they're actually talking about full duplex Wi-Fi. They've been talking about full duplex Wi-Fi for many years, but it's, trying to see what it's going to be, whether that actually happens or not, whether because it's not cost effective or whatever. There will be some great technologies that kind of filter out from there. And that's the important thing to look at is that, that it's not just, even when a standard come out or a certification come out, it's not like I have to support all that, but there might be some nuggets and stuff buried in that you definitely will show up one of these days.
It's all part of the process, isn't it? You discover, you try things, you learn.
Exactly.
And
sometimes it just doesn't work. Or it doesn't effectively work in a production network.
Exactly. Yeah, there's commercial application, and there's theoretical, and somewhere in the mix of all that, we get what we have today at the current.
Exactly. And one of the important things people realize is the best technology never wins. And whether that's, a 747 or a supersonic Concorde, or whether it's Ethernet versus token ring, or whether it's whatever, it's got to be cost effective. It's got to be something that's easy to deploy and use, not just the best technology.
How did you transition into Wi-Fi? Why Wi-Fi?
I got tired of thicknet cables. No, as networking evolved, as I said, I started with thicknet cables and went through that whole repeated shared environment into the switched environment, and then I moved to different companies as we went along. So I've worked with the Aeronet product, I've worked with the Aruba product, I've worked with the Xeris product, and obviously I work with the Aerohive product, which is actually really, really important that I went through the wired evolution, and I've also went through the wireless evolution in a way which I think was very lucky for me, because a lot of people get into a certain environment, whether they're working for a vendor, working for a supplier, working for a company, and they know one technology for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 years. And I've actually worked with different technology, not just different technology, but different architectures. In Wi-Fi, you think you have the controller and the controllerless. I've worked for environments that had both. So I didn't get this ideology of that, you can only work, it only works this way or it only works that way. It's like, they both work, they do different things. And it actually, I think it gave me an advantage over a lot of other people that have been locked into the same architecture for 10 years or so.
That kind of leads into the other question I was going to ask you is what's something you think you got right on early in as you started your career?
What I got right, and I think, and I strongly recommend it to other people, is in order to be successful as a technician, as an engineer, or whatever in Wi-Fi, you really need to understand layer 1, layer 2 type functionalities of how Wi-Fi really works. And obviously, there's certifications out there, and there's a lot of books out there that teach you that. But it's very also important to realize that it's not just you're going to be successful, and I mean professionally successful, by not just knowing how Wi-Fi works, but also by the use cases and what I can use it for, what I can use it for in education, what I can use it for in healthcare, what I can use it for in hospitality. So understand that level. And for another way to see it, for your professional success, and once again, everybody has a different idea what that's going to be. Give yourself the knowledge and the skill set to be able to have discussions at a C level. I mean, it's nice to go in and be able to discuss, what PDPs work, like, and how CSMAC and all that stuff works. But it's also important to be able to go in and explain, how Wi-Fi and IoT and all this is going to work. A few years ago, we were all talking about the monetization of Wi-Fi, which there's a lot of hype associated with that. But there's also some very, very valuable nuggets. And understanding that allows you to go in and talk to the chief marketing officer about the value of a Wi-Fi solution, and not just talk to the IT department. And that's where you become very, very successful, and you make yourself more valuable, not just financially, but as a consultant type in that environment. And that's very, very important, at least in my mind.
Very cool. If you could go back and give yourself some advice as you started out, what advice might you give yourself?
I don't know if I'd give myself any different advice. Hands-on is really, really important. Obviously, depending on different people learn different ways, and reading books and knowing all this stuff and getting the certifications are very, very important. But do as many site surveys as possible. I got lucky, and I've probably done 1 million site surveys, and you learn so much by doing those. And even if the people listening here, even if you don't have a lot of those opportunities, if you've got some type of survey tool or whatever, and you got a friend that works at the local supermarket or whatever, go do as many as you can, because it's going to make you so much smarter. And one of the things that I've learned out of that is that when you're doing site surveys and stuff, and it's like I always say it's 40% science and 40% art and 20% black magic, because when you're doing this stuff, you're going to find that RF gets to areas that you're going, how's that even getting here? And it's going to not get to areas. And the more you do, and the more you do at an earlier age, there are people I've talked to that I've done 20 or 30. Well, I've probably done 400 or 500 in reality. And so that's where, you get successful early on. And so it's become you and how you read it, not necessarily a specific piece of equipment or whatever.
That's great. Besides the doing, is there a specific certification or class or experience you think everyone should go through?
Well, you've got the whole CWNA type architecture, and from the industry out there, I would say that's really the best starting place. But that's really what it is. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of information in those books, so I would definitely start there and make sure you understand the foundations of it. But then, obviously, you need to go into a lot more hands-on, a lot more capability. So once again, the CWNA type program is very, very important. But that's a starting point. That's not an end point in the world according to Perry.
Well, I'm hearing that
Yeah.
echoed a lot, just like that you don't just arrive. It does show your progress, but like you said, it really is
It's like coming out of college
moving you
with an
forward.
engineering degree. A lot of times people come out of college with an engineering degree, and they're not starting as a chief engineer in any company. They're starting at the junior guy. So they gave you the background, they gave you the experience, and a lot of time these junior engineers coming out, they've got a solution looking for a problem. But so you got to kind of knock them back just a little bit and say, okay, you've got the foundation. Let's get into the real world now. And that's an important thing to understand, because how Wi-Fi works on paper and how Wi-Fi works in the real world is in many times very, very different. And it's very important to have a good set of peers around you that can kind of point you in the right direction, or at least be your advocates and help you.
That's great. Kind of along the same lines, what does investing in yourself as a WLAN pro mean to you?
Learning everything you can about, once again, not just layer one and layer two, about the industry and what's happening around it. These days, we typically use the term back in the day. Back in the day when I was first coming up in networking, a lot of your networking journals were paper. There weren't websites anymore.
Yeah.
And I would honestly get probably 20 different magazines of one type or another a week. And what I would do is, as they showed up, I'd quickly flip through them and rip out the pages of interesting articles. And I'd put them
Mm,
aside, and then come Saturday morning, I'd sit down out on my deck or porch or whatever with a lot of cups of coffee and go through the important ones. So that's, once again,
yeah.
Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi. We need to understand that. But then go through, whether you have some type of favorite website that automatically sends you links for the information that is of interest to you, or what should be interested to you, or some type of RSS feed, or some type of individuals or sites you follow. That's the only way to keep up, because it is constantly changing. We right now, 11AX is a big thing right now. There's other technologies already on the horizon that go beyond that. So it's important to keep track of not only that, but then like the security stuff, the Wi-Fi Alliance WPA3 type functionality that's are out there. What's happening in IoT, and along those lines, we live and breathe in the Wi-Fi world. And my whole view is that IoT is going to be very, very Wi-Fi centric, not just because not because it's the best technology for it, but because it already exists. But you're going to have Z-Wave and Zigbee and Sigfox and Thread and other low power technologies, and LTEW and MQTT. So there's a lot of other things that are going to impact your life. And so, to invest in yourself, it's got to actually be, it says invest in yourself as you said, what, wireless LAN professional.
Yeah.
Well, almost just think of it as wireless, because there's a lot of other
Yeah.
technologies that are going to tie together.
Is there a mistake in the industry you see people making on a regular basis that you wish you could just stop from happening?
Let's see. Can I get myself in a lot of trouble here by saying an answer? Okay.
Yeah. You need to think
No,
about that
one of
for
the
a moment.
challenges, and I mean this honestly, and I mean this with all due respect, is there's a lot of well-known individuals in the IT environment, in different organizations, that write a lot of blogs and write all this stuff, and they're very, very smart individuals. But what I strongly recommend is avoid seeing these individuals as the great learned knowledge, because everybody's wrong at some time. And so, learn from these people, take it, but then actually kind of take a step back, because as you'll see over time, that just because one person says this is the way the world should be, doesn't necessarily mean that's the way the world would be. If you go back over the last few years or so, and you see the discussions about, let's just use Wi-Fi in general, is like 2.4 versus
Mhm.
5 gig. 2.4 is evil, 5 gig is good. They're both technologies that need to be leveraged. Then we had the whole controller versus controllerless environment, and that became a religious discussion. Both technologies tend to have their value, and me being able to have worked in both environments, it gives. Multi-state radios built into access points, where both radios can operate on 5 gig. You've got people that, 5 years ago, it's the stupidest thing in the world, it'll never work. Some of those same people today are saying, well, if you do it right, it'll work. So it's just,
Yeah.
don't necessarily think that, some of these guys are Gandhi. So it's, see, I'm going to get myself in trouble. I already know who's going to text me when goes out. So
Well, speaking of not being perfect, is there a mistake you made along your journey that you really learned something
I
valuable from?
make a lot of mistakes, or you learning opportunities, which is the best way to do that. And a couple ones that I'm thinking of is that, be aware that there are a lot of smart people out there, and which is kind of opposite. And it's not opposite of what I just said, but sometimes you'll go into an organization, and you're there to do a site survey, or you're there to do something, do an analysis, and you're looking at the network. And sometimes when you're ignorant, and that's myself, and ignorant, I mean ignorant not as a negative, but just somebody who just doesn't know what they're doing. You'll go in there and think of yourself, what idiot set up this network? But the more you learn, the more you understand what's going on, you say, that's necessarily a bad idea. It's kind of, give you a quick example. You go into this environment. This is real life. You go in there, and the guy's running 4 separate channels in the 2.4 band, which in North America, everybody says 1, 6, 11, blah, blah, blah. And if you ever go into a business and somebody's running, 4 channels in that area, 95% of the time, 4 or more channels, 95% of the time you think the guy doesn't really know what he's doing. But the 5% of the time is the guy really does know what he's doing, and he's doing it right. And that's one of the important things to understand, is that make sure you have all the information before you start making judgments on that. And the second thing is take your time and do it right. Now, I'm give you another example. We were doing site survey at a college, a university, and they had these 10 dorms, and these 10 dorms looked exactly the same. And when I was doing this, the company I worked for, after we did a survey, we'd say, okay, it's going to take X amount of APs, and it's a guarantee. So if we were wrong, we had to come in and add all the new ones. So it's important to do things the right way. So we went in, and these 10 dorms, exactly the same, floor plans, everything. And so we said, let's be cautious here. So I think we did 2 or 3 dorms. We do a site survey of them, and they both came out, or the 2 or 3 of them all came out and said, okay, it's going to take 4 or 5 APs, whatever it was, to cover this dorm. Finally win the deal. We actually did the install, and there was one dorm. It ended up taking 17 APs to cover that one dorm. And it's because even though it looked exactly the same, this one dorm was all built with concrete and rebar. I don't know if it was designed for the end of times or whatever. Every other dorm was just sheetrock and timber. And so, you're typically going to say, do every building. Most people aren't going to do that, but that was one time that really burnt.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have similar buildings, at least go and take a reference sample at a couple of them. And once again, the more you do this, the better you're going to get. You don't have to redo the whole thing, but at least go check in just a couple of areas. And
That's great. Yeah, that would be an unfortunate
yeah, and your
turn of
boss
events
looks at you
for
and say,
sure.
what were you doing? How can you be off by a factor of 4?
Is there a project you've been involved with that you're super proud of?
Actually, a couple of them. One, it just as my life. One of the things I did in the Air Force is I was involved with the stealth program, the stealth fighter program, while it was still a secret. So that was kind of me personally. I'm very, very proud to be involved in that program. But as far as the Wi-Fi side, one of the things I'm actually pretty excited about right now is the 11AX. Obviously, it's a new technology. I'm kind of a little bit of an evangelist for the company right now. We're going around doing a lot of road shows and stuff, and I think it's really important because, as I said, I've been in the switching world or in the wired world for a long time. And when we flipped from the typical repeated environment to a switched environment and a wired environment, it just changed everything. I mean, the way wired took off was just exponential. And I see the same thing happening with 11AX. And I'm not saying it's switched Wi-Fi. It's not, it's not full duplex, anything like that. But it's important to understand and appreciate that 11AX is totally different than any of the other technologies came before. A, B, G. When N came along, it was a big transition. We went into the whole MIMO type thing. We went away from multipath being a bad thing to multipath being a good thing, or potentially a good thing. 11AX is the same thing, and that's one of the things I'm pretty proud of, is that making people understand what 11AX is all about. Every other protocol is like, I'm going to make it faster and I'm going to give you higher data rates. And that's really what it was all about. And 11AX is a transition from that. It's actually being more efficient. Yeah, it goes a little bit faster, and you can make those arguments, but it is actually changing the way Wi-Fi is going to work. Totally, going off on a tangent, and it's a very, very important to understand that. And that, along with a shift from that's kind of my AP level focus. And the other is what's maybe probably even more important overall, is that better management of the network. Because if you talk to the average user, nobody wants to manage their Wi-Fi anymore. They want to install it, they want to configure it, and give me a weekly report. Now, we keep saying Wi-Fi is utility. It's just like your lights. It's just like your water. Well, I don't go and tweak on those designs every other day like a lot of people do with their Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi has got to get smarter. And whether you call it machine learning or AI or IoT, pick whatever acronym you want, the whole idea is technology is available today to be able to monitor what the clients are doing and then make intelligent decisions about it. If I've got if I got a client connected to an AP and it's having poor performance, be smart enough to say, okay, what about the other clients on that AP? What about the clients around that AP? Are they having similar performance issues? If so, it could be the AP, it could be the RF environment. Or what about that client's having a problem. And in my 10,000 clients on my network, I've got 8 or 9 having a similar problem. And if I can identify automatically that, they're all this certain type of phone with this certain type of OS, that gives me a lot more
Mhm.
knowledge. And that's important. It's making intelligent decisions like that and correlating data. And that's actually part of the whole IoT thing, the intelligence side. But I think that's the most important thing coming down. I mean, obviously 11AX is different, but you get to the point, you got people arguing about, spatial streams and QAM and all that stuff. And that's interesting. I mean, it's kind of nerdy type talk and it's kind of fun. But if you're going to go and talk to the C-level people, that's not what they want to talk about. They want to talk about this higher level type stuff. And what's it going to do to improve my business? What's it going to do to my bottom line? And that, I think, is more important. And it comes back to what I said at the very beginning. You got to have that foundation of layer 1, layer 2 type Wi-Fi,
Yeah.
but you've got to have that stuff above it and the value of it.
You mentioned earlier, obviously these things take years. What's the landscape you think looking like over, is this 3 years out, 2 years out till we're gonna see some of these more
Well, a
significant
lot of
changes?
this, there's some neat stuff being developed within the Wi-Fi Alliance and stuff like that. But all they're really doing is putting more intelligence or encouraging vendors, and by vendors I mean obviously ourselves plus chip manufacturers, to put more intelligence in your APs and also in your clients. Actually, the client is an important part. And by sharing more data, I can make better decisions. But reality is, it's going to be the individual vendors that drive this, because it's not going to be Broadcom's going to come up with this great chipset, or
Yeah,
Qualcomm or Quantana or any of these stuff. They're going to gather all this information and make it available. But it's like, once again, you use the artificial intelligence, or whatever word you want, is how do I intelligently look at that? And that's a tough thing. To those out there, yourself or whoever who deals with voice. In voice, you have something called an MOS, a mean optimum score, that kind of rates how good the voice quality is. But it's kind of a guess. It's not like hard fact numbers there. What if I could do something like that for my Wi-Fi client experience? Obviously, the RSSI and the data rate's important, but roaming is also important. What are the 5, the 6, the 7, the 10 different components that identify a good Wi-Fi experience? And depending on what I'm doing, what application I'm running, what kind of device I'm using, how do I weight those different components to actually give me a value? Whether it's going to be red, green, or yellow, or whether it's going to be a speedometer of quality. It can't just be like an idiot light on a car. Red is
yeah.
bad, green is good. It's got to be something better than that, because that also allows me to see trends. And if I can do that, then I can actually prevent problems before they happen, or actually react very, very quickly to them. So that's the fun stuff. And you're going to have a lot of different Wi-Fi vendors out there. I can rattle off names, but they're competitors. We're all doing different things like that. And we've all got, the way I look at it, I never put down any specific vendor or whatever in that, because we all got secret sauce.
Yeah,
We all do something
yeah,
better than
yeah.
the other person does. And I'm trying to say my secret sauce is better than their secret sauce, but it depends on what the customer is actually looking for. And I think that's the real value. And this, once again, competition is good. One vendor comes out with some neat stuff and then somebody else ups the score a little bit. And that's what's going to make the end user, the client, a better experience for that. And that's why it's important for, once again, back to where we were, the techs out there, the engineers out there, to not just be aware of what's happening with the product or the vendor that you deal with a day in and day out. Look outside the box and see what other people are doing, because once again, you're going to give you a better view of the network doing it that way.
That's great. If there's a piece of advice you could give to a WLAN pro who's kinda starting out in their career, wanting to succeed as a pro, what advice would you give them?
It kind of goes back to what I said before. Try to avoid the hype a little bit about one technology over the other, or one vendor over the other, or one architecture over the other. Find yourself some smart people around you. Mind you, it sounds kind of opposite of what I was saying before. Find some smart people around you and leverage their knowledge. Don't necessarily follow them blindly, but there's a lot of good information out there, and take advantage of it. Have, multiple mentors and stuff, and people you can bounce ideas off, that won't just come back and say, no, that's a stupid idea. um, so look at it that way, and I think that's the most
Tell you why it's a stupid idea.
exactly, and that's the most important thing. And that's, in many ways, having a good group of resource around you is far more important than any piece of equipment or any tool you're ever going to find, because there's a lot of good survey tools, there's a lot of good sniffer tools, there's a lot of good stuff. But what you can, and I'm quite sure there's people will argue which one is better than the other, but they're all going to give you a certain amount of information, and how well you understand that information is really going to determine how well you do with that tool. It's not just going to be the tool itself. I mean, if the tool solved all your problems, we'd all be out of business, and the
robots would take over.
exactly, the janitorial staff can monitor the Wi-Fi while they're at it. And I mean that facetiously, obviously, but it's like tools only give you information. You have to decide what to do, and they might suggest causes of action or what's going on, but it's up to you to make those decisions. Because once again, back to an earlier thing, at Wi-Fi RF surveys and stuff, it's not a hard science. There is science there, but there's also experience, and there's also the stuff that, God, I don't know why it's doing that, and so that's the fun part, and then once again, unless the customer's looking over your shoulder yelling at you, but that is the fun part, trying to figure out what the heck is going on here.
Yeah. Well, speaking of equipment, is there a favorite piece of equipment you're using these days that you're really enjoying?
Actually, not a specific one. I go through a lot of different pieces of equipment, a lot of different type of analyzers, and once again, as with anything else, they all got advantages. They all have bells and whistles. So I'm not going to give anybody that this thing is so much better than everybody else's. I'm not going to do that. Once again, they all give you a certain amount of information, and the most important tool is your brain, yours. And so the more you know, the better you're going to be able to use that tool.
Well, how can people stay in touch with you and follow what you're up to, Perry?
Okay, I hate to say this, but I'm not a big social media guy. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can stop if you're going to Prague. Hopefully everybody listening to this is going to Prague. Stop in and say hello. Obviously, you can get me at pcorrell@arrowhive.com anytime. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. But once again, LinkedIn, I'm kind of up there, and want to stop by and say hello in Prague. I got a couple presentations at that event, and hopefully I'll convince all you guys how wonderful 11AX is while I'm there.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Perry. We appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks, Matthew. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it's interesting stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you.
10 Talks.
So I think some of you heard me yesterday. I work for a company with no name. And primarily, I'm speaking on more of a personal behalf than my organisation. Principally, what I'm talking about today is how I foresee IT changing, primarily with the new standard of 802.3bt, which is fundamentally the higher power over Ethernet side of things. So, as we know, there are more and more devices being connected to the network. Traditionally, I used to say they're more Wi-Fi. I've changed my mind to say they're actually going to be more Ethernet devices being plugged in. But every single one of these devices, whether they're PCs, phones, voice devices, access points, cameras, whatever, primarily are becoming far more complicated, and in a number of ways. One, they need power. They also need to be allocated from a network resource point of view into certain VLANs. You need to sort of make sure you have the relevant IP scoping from a DHCP, sort out your option 43, 60, 150 options if necessary. And again, all these devices need to be sort of provided to the network, quality of service, authenticated, etc. So fundamentally what we're seeing is still a massive increase in switching infrastructure being installed. From a networking point of view, again, more and more Ethernet devices are being plugged in. The amount of traffic they use is obviously increasing, but fundamentally the people that actually have to manage these on an operational day-to-day level. All right. Okay. The operational demands are obviously increasing. Staffing levels in organisations are staying flat. And as we all know, devices are being plugged into remote sites. So again, you still need remote sources and things like that. So where we're really seeing the bigger demand for Ethernet is really the building automation. So traditionally, Ethernet cables are provided for phones and PCs, but we're already starting to see a massive increase in general sensors, LED lighting, badging systems, fire alarm systems, heating, ventilation, lifts, and all of these technologies from a building operations facilities management are starting to use the IT network for management and control. What's really driving this is, or will drive this in my view, is 802.3bt. So as we're all probably aware, the first standard was the 3AF. They provided sort of 15 watts from the power source. Then it moved up to 380, which is pretty much where we are now. And for the vast majority of us, that's pretty much enough. So it provides enough power for our access points and our security cameras. But there is a massive demand now for higher power requirements. So the 3BT standard, which is likely to be actually certified later on the year, will actually increase the number of classes, but ultimately, more importantly, potentially providing up to 71.3 watts to the actual power device down an Ethernet cable. So there'll be a couple of different changes. Class 0 will disappear. We'll still use PoE or PoE Plus, and now we're moving to PoE Plus if you want to put it into strange worlds. LLDP is optional, again, part of that negotiation from the device to the switch to actually get the power requirements. But yeah, it's all about increasing power to the device at the end of the day, because we all know the limitations on mobile is pretty much the battery. So yes, we plug our laptops and phones into batteries to recharge them, but a lot of wireless devices, battery is an issue, especially if you're going to use them for a long time. From a sort of slightly larger spec aspect, not expecting you to read this in any way, shape or form, PoE 2.3BT will still use Category 5 and Category 6 cabling. One of the advantages we have from an EMEA point of view is most of our Ethernet cabling is shielded. So again, you don't need to replace much of the existing infrastructure that it really requires. Again, part of the standards, there is sort of a setup phase, which is included now. So it starts off with phase 3 from the power source to the power device or the consumer device. So it sort of powers it up. And then the power device actually requests the amount of power it can support and actually the power it actually wants. And then the power source equipment actually provides that as required. Like I mentioned, there are a couple of rules built into the standard. The switch will only supply the power if it's requested. So it's not going to power a device that doesn't need power, which obviously makes clear sense, but not to everyone. And there is a conservation mode as well. So again, some devices such as cameras will request a certain amount, but when it's in sort of hibernation mode or there's an occupational sensor, it might switch on, require an additional load. And if it has to move around as a third mode, again, additional power may be required. So the 3BT standard will actually take this into account as well. There are other standards semi-related to the new sort of power side of things. I think the Ethernet Alliance will actually come up with new badges. So you can see sort of badge 1, badge 4 as an example. This indicates the type of class the device is actually used. So again, you can look at an access point as an example and see really what type of class you actually need for the power. So there's obviously going to be interoperability and labeling included, and there's going to be some 802.3 general sort of power standard stuff as well. Hopefully you're not going to burn your comms rooms down. So some of the devices that will use the 3BT standard, we obviously know about sort of access points and cameras. What we're seeing, a lot of these technologies are siloed. And over time, we're actually seeing these becoming integrated. So yes, we're seeing security cameras. Yes, there's facial recognition systems. Yes, there's gateway entry systems. If you can start actually combining those, so you can walk up to a gate, the camera sees you, go to a facial recognition system and allow you open. Again, there's efficiency performances there as well. And I'll talk about sort of heating, lighting, ventilation in a moment. But again, you can start seeing some of these tight silo technologies now being incorporated into the IT infrastructure. I hate this slide because there's an obvious mistake in it. But this just gives you an indication every single dot there is actually an Ethernet cable. So traditionally we thought about normal PCs and access points, but we're seeing now organisations producing digital signage, occupational sensors, LED lighting, general displays and things like that as well. And pretty much you can power any device via Ethernet cable, so you don't have to have a separate sort of power run to a particular location.
What's the dark line?
What's the shade control? So again, from a ventilation point of view, cooling a building down actually takes up a lot of power.
Okay, maybe I should have said red.
Yes, that was the obvious mistake. So again, obviously on the blue side, if you can, if you reduce the power, obviously reduce the light coming into a building, you need to control it less. An obvious example from a deployment point of view is PoE lighting. Again, that seems to be a big demand at the moment, especially for greenfield sites, and even sort of retrospectively for other environments as well. Again, just from how much cabling you need to do and the different types, just makes the deployment installation so much easier. It can be integrated into occupational sensors and lighting controls and all the rest of it as well. So there will be a requirement to validate PoE. So yes, there are power problems, as mentioned yesterday. Just because you've got a 32-port switch doesn't necessarily mean you're going to power 32 PoE devices, especially now moving up to higher requirements. Obviously, there's an in-out calculation to take into account as well. So understanding what the switches can deliver, understanding what the devices actually require is going to be crucial moving forward. Old cable can probably still be used, but again, sometimes it might need to be tested. And if you use PoE repeaters, again, exchange ranges, but not necessarily you have the correct link capabilities. So yeah, power budgets primarily there. There are ways of testing it, and obviously there's you can validate it in a variety of different ways. So there are tools that can validate which class you get and also draw the power from particular devices. We have a testing process that we generally recommend as well. So, obviously, is the cable valid? Are you getting the necessary wattage and load? Are you connected to the network in the correct way? LLDP, right port, right switch, authentication, VLAN, scoping from an IP address. Can you get to the network resources, et cetera, et cetera? So conclusions, 20 seconds left. Primarily, I foresee the IT network and facilities management converging in the future. So basically improved operational technology. So you can integrate, obviously, the traditional LAN data type of requirements or Wi-Fi LAN data into more of a business moving forward. So again, just to conclude, make sure you plan your deployment from a network aspect and make sure you understand your power management requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter @KeithRParsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.